welcome back to Around the SEC, the show where everything just means more. I'm Micah Farmer.
And I'm Mia Roy.
And it was another great week of SEC football. Some big upsets this past week as well. Vanderbilt kept on rolling, and maybe to the surprise of some, not to the surprise of others. But let's start off with our Week 10 recap and the big upset of the week. South Carolina, how about the Gamecocks over A&M?
I mean, that was crazy. And they stormed that field. I don't know,
Yes.
Mixed feelings on storming the field. But, I think South Carolina just dominated in every aspect. But who stood out to me was Demetrius Knight Jr. 10 tackles, 1 assist. I mean, for 245 pounds, he's a beast for South Carolina.
He can move for his size for sure. And I'm surprised you didn't talk about Rocket Sanders, the Arkansas fan that you are.
Okay,
he had a
yeah.
great game. 20 for 144, 2 touchdowns. This is the guy that South Carolina thought they were getting when he transferred in from Arkansas. And
It is.
he really produced. Lenore Sellers also ran for over 100 yards. The A&M run defense just looked completely out of sorts. And
Oh, yeah.
for a defense that played so well for a lot of the LSU game, you think, oh, well, they can surely carry it forward versus South Carolina. I thought if anything would struggle, it would be the A&M offense versus the South Carolina edge rushers. But A&M just couldn't do anything at all outside of the second quarter. Only 3 points outside of that second 15-minute period. Definitely not what you want to have from your supposedly playoff contending offense.
And scoreless in the second half. I mean, and then they had 7 penalties for 68 yards, and South Carolina had 3 for 25 yards. They just looked disheveled.
Yeah, I completely agree, and that has to be a breath of fresh air for South Carolina, who it feels like
Yes,
it's
it
been
does.
on the wrong side of the refs all season, so to actually win the penalty battle is something that
Yeah.
I think they'll definitely take for sure. But as far as A&M, very disappointing. This was a team that had SEC championship aspirations. Now they get their first conference loss. Obviously, they're
Yeah.
still up there, but you got a little bit more difficult road to go now with tiebreakers versus teams like Georgia and Texas at the end of the year.
I would agree, for sure.
Next game up is Ole Miss at Arkansas. I'm sorry, Mia, we have to talk about it. This is one of my worst upset pick of the weeks of the year as Arkansas got flattened. Coincidentally, both of my bad upset picks of the week have been with Arkansas as they got flattened by LSU and Ole Miss respectively. So I might have to start listening to you and never trust
I'm
this team.
telling you, heart rate cogs. I've said it before. I'll say it again. They were just awful.
Yeah.
I mean, all the way. The scoop and score was humiliating. I mean, what were they doing? I don't know. I thought it was quite embarrassing. But if you're Ole Miss, you'll take it. They had quite the game. Jackson Dart, 515 yards, 6 touchdowns. Jordan Watkins was just a matching puzzle piece, I thought, with 255 yards and 5 touchdowns.
Yeah, 5 touchdowns as a receiver is insanity
Yeah.
for the wideout. And this Ole Miss team, I think this is what people thought they could be at the start of the year. And this is something I mentioned at the beginning of the season. How long will it take all these transfers of Ole Miss to gel together and form a cohesive unit? I think you're finally starting to see that now. They've looked very solid the last couple weeks. This is a big win, and they still only have 2 conference losses, so they have an outside chance of making the title game still. They just have to win out from here, in my opinion, but it's still a hard road for the Rebels. I don't know that they're going to make the playoffs after, especially the loss to Kentucky. It's a huge black
That one
mark
hurt.
on their schedule, but you never know. Maybe they can bounce back. They get a great shot versus Georgia this weekend in Oxford, so we'll see if they can capitalize on that.
Yeah.
Then next up, the game that was sad for me this week was the Florida-Georgia game, not the Georgia-Florida game, the Florida-Georgia game. And I want to get your thoughts on this because I've had a lot of people agree with me on this. I've had some disagree. I think that if DJ Lagway's hamstring doesn't go bye-bye in the second quarter, that Florida wins this game. Because
I don't know if they win. It's a lot closer. Aiden Warner struggled big time. I do think that was a turning point in the game. I wouldn't say win, but I think it's a 3.7-point game.
Yeah, you look at the Florida offense after Lagway went down, and it was really just Jacoby Jackson, a little bit of Jaden Ball. There was the driver that went down the field in the fourth quarter, and they had this game tied late. I think if in that situation, if you have DJ Lagway on the field, then your offense is more dynamic. You can probably move the ball more, and also the big thing is I think you possess the ball for more time. Your defense gets less tired. Maybe they don't concede later in the game. I think Florida's going to look at this as a what could have been game, and they've had a lot of those this year. The Tennessee game stands to mind as well, and it just feels like another step, another mark against Billy Napier and this coaching staff just week after week. I don't think this one's as much on him because who's going to expect you to beat Georgia with your third-string quarterback that's a Yale transfer? I don't think many people are going to rip into him for that. But On the other side, Carson Beck still continuing to struggle. Did throw for 300 yards, but 3 picks again. This guy's really not having a great year.
Yeah, 2 touchdowns though, and you heard Kirby Smart in his post-game mention that, and that they need to protect Carson Beck a little bit more. I don't know. I thought that was an interesting take on it. I feel like there's only so much the offensive line can do.
The offensive line can't control when he throws it right at a corner. That's not the offensive line's fault.
I agree with that. That's decision making, but
yeah. And hopefully that'll get better because this is a guy that was touted as one of the higher prospects in the NFL draft this year, and he really hasn't played like it. I think has over double-digit interceptions in his last 3 games now, so definitely not where you want to be. But speaking of not where you want to be, let's talk about Auburn football and the loss to Vanderbilt. I know Vanderbilt's good this year. They're 6-3. Somehow not in the playoff rankings, even though Missouri is.
That one's crazy.
No idea.
No, that's crazy.
And all the people are going to say, well, Missouri beat Vanderbilt. You put those 2 teams on the field today, tell me who you think's winning. It's not Missouri. But the Vanderbilt offense wasn't at its best in this game. The Auburn defense played solid, but the Auburn offense looked just non-functional. It looked like 1870s Rutgers out there on the field.
It was bad. And, you know, the announcer said before the game that Auburn needed to convert some 3rd downs. And they only got 2 out of 13 for 3rd down efficiency. Even Hugh Freeze mentioned they have to convert on 3rd downs. And that's between the interceptions and the 3rd down efficiency, that's the story for Auburn this year.
Yeah, it really has been. And coming off a week where Jarquez had almost 280 yards on 23 carries, they gave him 12 carries. And I know Hugh Freeze said he was tired, but I don't care if you're tired. Carry the ball. Unless it is risking injury, you have to put the game in your best player's hands in games like this where otherwise you're going to lose. And Vanderbilt is just the better team. Vanderbilt is the better team at this point in the year. And Junior Sherrill, only 1 catch. There were only 2 Vandy receivers with more than 1 catch in this game, and they were Quincy Skinner and Eli Stowers. They both had 2. So this game was kind of where offense went to die, but the Auburn offense was even worse somehow.
Some history on this game that I thought was interesting. Auburn is bowl eligible for the first time since 2018. Vanderbilt, sorry.
All good.
This is the first time Vanderbilt has beat Auburn and Alabama in the same season since 1955.
Yeah.
It's Auburn's first loss at home against Vanderbilt, and Pavia is now beating Hugh Freeze 3 straight seasons.
Yeah. Diego Pavia just owns the guy.
He does.
How it is. I saw a lot of people talking about, I know, election week this week, people were saying Pavia for Alabama governor after the win over both Alabama and Auburn, which was funny to me. They had like the electoral college map, and Alabama was just black with a gold V on it. And for Vanderbilt, I was like, this is funny.
I mean, they've owned Alabama this year.
They've earned it. They've earned it.
Yes,
so
they have.
Another good win for the Commodores. We'll see how they can finish out the season. They have a tough schedule. They still have to play LSU and Tennessee before the end of the year. But speaking of the Volunteers, they welcomed in Kentucky this week. It was the blackout game, some of the better uniforms in college football, in my opinion, and they kind of struggled with Kentucky.
They did. I kind of expected a larger win, but they got it done. I thought Nico was solid.
Yeah.
292 yards, 1 touchdown. But Dylan Sampson, yet again, 142 yards and 2 touchdowns. I think he's just pretty consistent for Tennessee.
He keeps on rolling. He, to me, is one of the top 3 running backs in the SEC this season. He's played out of his mind. Nico Iamaleava, this is one of the better games from him, I think, this season. He really struggled over some recent weeks, but this is more what you want to see from the young quarterback. If you can build on this, maybe you have your program-saving player that you keep talking about. And the Kentucky offense, Jamarian Wilcox had a solid game, rushing for over 100 yards. And this is the first, I think this is really the most vulnerable you've seen the Tennessee run defense this season.
Yeah.
They really struggled more so than usual. And if you're a team like Vanderbilt who loves this option football and you see Tennessee vulnerable versus the run, you think, maybe I have a path to victory now. So we'll see how much they're studying that in the film. But that is the Week 10 recap. Let's move on to our winners and losers. Mia, who's your winner of the week?
My winner's Ole Miss. Ole Miss went from being totally irrelevant in the playoff conversation to now having an outside chance. We'll get to that in a second. And then 2 players breaking records. That just, with Jackson Dart and Jordan Watkins, that right there enough is to be a winner of the week for me. And Arkansas, not a great team, but they're not bad this year. They're pretty mediocre. And I'm starting to wonder if Ole Miss is peaking just at the right time.
Maybe if they can keep up this momentum, who knows what they can do. They definitely played an incredible game. My winner of the week, it had to be South Carolina. They welcomed in a top 10 at the time Texas A&M team and beat their brains in. It was reminiscent of the Tennessee game a few years ago when that happened. They feel like they have one of these games in their system every year now under Shane Beamer, where they just welcome a ranked team into Willie B and say, "We're going to murder you," and then beat them by 20 plus. Absolutely incredible game. This is I think it's one of my favorite edge duos in sports or in college football right now with Kyle Kennard and Dylan Stewart. I love those guys so much.
Yeah.
They're both freaks. So South Carolina winner of the week, Beamer ball back? Question mark? Maybe we'll see. But on to loser of the week now. Who's your loser?
Well, South Carolina is your winner, but Texas A&M is my loser. This game dropped them in the AP poll from 10 to 15.
Yeah.
That is a significant drop. And stat-wise, South Carolina really just dominated. And their defense, like we mentioned, was just awful. I mean, they let Sellers run into the end zone. And then when they immediately go for it on 4th and 1 and come up short.
Yeah.
Just they had some plays where you're thinking, what are you doing? They didn't look like they wanted to win the game, in my opinion.
No, they really didn't. I think if Texas A&M wins this game, you see them right around where Notre Dame is, maybe 9th or 10th in the playoff rankings.
Oh, yeah.
Instead, they're down at 14th. They're behind Alabama now, which doesn't make any sense to me personally, but we'll see what happens the rest of the season with the Aggies. It feels like classic Texas A&M, kind of this loss.
It does.
Huge loser of the week. I completely agree, but I'm going to give it to someone else. Sorry, Mia, it's Arkansas once again. I feel like we talked about this before the show. I feel like every week you're on, my loser of the week is Arkansas. So I don't know how that keeps happening, but it does.
They deserve it.
Yeah, they got beat up by Ole Miss. Looked, like you said earlier, frankly, terrible, lost. And this is such a weird team because they've shown potential. The win over Tennessee, games like that, they play teams close, and then they come out versus Ole Miss and LSU and go, we don't really feel like doing that whole football thing today. So
no.
I don't know what it is with Arkansas, but at this point I'm not trusting them the rest of the season to do much of anything.
Yeah, I agree. It looked like Ole Miss had their playbook. I mean, they were just – they couldn't do anything. But
they could not. Moving on now to the playoff picture, and with the first college football playoff rankings coming out, we figured we'd give you an update on the SEC teams that we think can still make the playoffs. So, Mia, looking at the SEC, who do you think has the best chance, and who do you think, even though it might not be a shoo-in, who do you think still has a shot?
I think Georgia and Texas for sure are in. And I think Tennessee and Alabama, yeah, but don't get comfortable. And then Texas A&M, LSU, and Ole Miss all have some work to do, but aren't totally out of the top 12.
Yeah. I agree with that. I think Georgia, Texas are positioned the best.
Yeah.
I would actually put A&M up with them purely because A&M gets Texas at home the last week of the season.
Okay, yeah.
I think if they can win out and then win that game, you're looking at a 10-2 A&M team that made the SEC championship. I think they'd be absolutely fine. I think LSU, Ole Miss definitely need some help. I think Alabama needs some help too. They're going to have to beat LSU pretty convincingly this week, and then they're going to have to win out. The problem is from here on out, they don't have a lot on their schedule that's really impressive other than the LSU game.
Yeah.
And they're sitting, 8th in the SEC right now. So not a great position for the Crimson Tide. Weirdly, I think Vanderbilt still has a shot. I know they come into this game unranked, but if they win out, I believe they would need a little bit of help. But if they went out and get some help, I believe they would make the SEC title game. And then I don't see how a committee is going to leave out a team that makes the SEC title game in a 12-team playoff format just because there is a lot of that SEC favoritism. But they're going to need a lot of help. I think Tennessee, even though they're ranked number 7, I think they need some help as well. This is a team that, even though they have a solid record, has not passed the eye test a lot of the season, and the committee is big on the eye test a lot of the time. So I think they'll have to improve. But that's kind of what your playoff picture looks like right now. Again, Georgia, Texas are the two that are in the clear driver's seat right now for both of us. But still got a few weeks left. 12-team playoff, obviously it's a lot different this year rather than the 4. You'll definitely see multiple SEC teams in this year, I would have to say. But let's move on to our picks for Week 11, and it's a good week of football. First up, we got Alabama at LSU. It says number 11 Alabama at number 15 LSU in the playoff rankings. It's going to be in Death Valley at night. Who you got?
I have Alabama. Bama knows, like you said, this is a must-win for the college football playoffs. Alabama has the most college football player appearances, wins, and championships. And I think Kalen DeBoer knows that. And I think him and his staff are going to be completely prepared for this game, knowing that this could get them a spot in the playoffs. And they're both coming off a bye week, so that's an interesting just take on the game. But Bama's coming off a win before that bye, and LSU's coming off a loss. So I think Alabama, with the momentum of a win and the rest off of a bye week, I think they're going to absolutely dominate LSU.
Well, I agree with a lot of what you said. I also think LSU has struggled versus running quarterbacks this season. Jalen Milroe is a prime example of that. However, Death Valley at night. That is my counterpoint. It is very tough to win there, even for Alabama. They lost when Jaden Daniels was there. This is one of the few places they've struggled, Death Valley at night, and then Jordan-Hare were some of the few places that other teams could consistently beat the Crimson Tide. And this LSU team, though not incredible, I think is on a fairly similar level to Alabama. And so because of the home field advantage, give me LSU. I think if this game was a neutral site or at Bryant-Denny, I would take Alabama. But because it's Death Valley night, give me the Tigers.
Okay.
Then next up, we got a game we mentioned earlier. It is number 3 with the playoff rings now. Number 3, Georgia, traveling down to Oxford to take on number 16, Ole Miss, and the Rebels coming off the big win this past week. You think Ole Miss keeps the momentum rolling, or you think Georgia stops it?
I think Georgia stops it. Georgia's only favored by 2.5, though.
Yeah.
That is surprising, but this is Georgia's final road game of the season, and we saw the last true road game they had against Texas on October 19th. They won 30-15.
Yeah.
So I don't think the fact that this is an away game for Georgia is concerning. I think they can handle that. And inside the red zone, they've been inside the red zone 35 times this season, and their opponents only 19. I just think Georgia is a stable team. They're consistent on the road, and I think they just have Ole Miss's number here.
Yeah, I completely agree that Georgia has Ole Miss's number. They dominated them last year in a game that a lot of people thought Ole Miss might upset them. And for Georgia as well, I think the one thing you have to be careful of is the Carson Beck turnover problem.
Mm-hmm.
I think in Oxford, if Carson Beck throws a couple picks, that is Ole Miss's path to victory. Goodness, trying to speak here, but I do think Georgia is good enough to win this game. I like the D-line for the Bulldogs. They are super athletic. I think they're going to make the Ole Miss offensive line have a long day up there, so give me Georgia as well. Next up, a game I am not excited to watch at all. It is Florida traveling down to DKR Austin to take on number 5 Texas.
Yeah. This is the first time in 84 years that they have played each other.
That's weird. I feel like they would have done that more, but...
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah.
And I think Florida is no matchup for Texas.
No.
I mean, Texas is 4th in the SEC. Florida's 12th. That right there is concerning.
Yeah, I think Florida is better than their 12th in the SEC, but at the same time, DJ Lagway right now doubtful for that game, and if Aiden Warner is chucked out there versus Texas, it's going to be a long day. I do think that the Texas offense has been struggling, and the Florida defense has been playing incredible football the last few weeks. They've really stepped it up, so I think they might be able to keep it close for a quarter or two, but Texas is just too good overall.
And Texas's offense is just electric. And inside at Austin, I mean, you're at your home field. It's going to be electric in that stadium.
Yeah, I think this is a long day for the Gators.
I agree.
Then next up we have the Vibes matchup of the week in South Carolina and Nashville taking on Vandy. Weird that neither of these teams are ranked, in my opinion. I feel like they both deserve to be, especially over Missouri. Anyway, who do you have in this one?
I have Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt is on a roll, and I think they're just going to continue with that momentum. They rank first in passes intercepted. They rank first in punt returns, red zone offense, and time of possession. Vanderbilt this year has really stood out, and I think that they're no matchup for South Carolina, especially at Vanderbilt. We saw how that happened for Alabama.
This is a very fun game. I think this is a very close game. I almost took South Carolina here because Diego Pavia, his one weakness has been pressure this season, and South Carolina can make some pressure with Kennard and Stewart. So I think that this is going to be a very close game. I think it's going to be a very fun game, but I do think Vandy rides the momentum of what has been a surprisingly electric crowd there this year. They've shown up. Now the team's good. The fans are showing up. So I think Vandy pulls this one off. I think they keep on rolling, move to 7-3. Isn't that crazy? 7-3 Vandy, possibly.
That's unheard of.
Yeah, definitely. Then the final game, and if you're watching this, please get help. It's the Oklahoma at Missouri game, and yikes. Who do you have?
I have Oklahoma. I struggled picking this game, but Oklahoma is the 3rd best rush defense in the country, and I think that Missouri's going to have to throw the ball if they want to beat Oklahoma, and I'm not quite sure they can do that.
Yeah.
So for that reason right there. And I just think that Missouri's a little banged up, so
Yeah, they
I'm
are.
taking Oklahoma.
Missouri is definitely banged up. Brady Cook's had some issues. Drew
Yeah.
Pines looked terrible, but Oklahoma, in my eyes, still doesn't have an offensive identity. It is tough to play in Missouri. I know they get a bit underrated, but that is a fairly tough
It is.
environment. I experienced it a couple weeks ago when I was up there. So I think Missouri still gets this done. I think the defensive line is the difference for Missouri in this game. Johnny Walker, I think, should be back healthy for this game for the Tigers. So if he is, whether it's Jackson Arnold or Michael Hawkins Jr., I think either one of them has a long day versus this Missouri defense. So give me Missouri, but close in a low-scoring game. I think it's going to be some pretty bad football.
Not an exciting game.
No, not at all. But I hope that was an exciting show, even though that will not be an exciting game. So thank you for those of you who tuned in. We'll make sure to tune in again next week. We break all this down, and it'll be getting ready for Week 12. But for now, enjoy your weekend of college football, and this has been Around the SEC.